They say, if someone wants to talk to you, they will. But what they don't say is how a single text message can feel like a courtroom, where every word is evidence. Every pause is a verdict, a simple okay, a delayed reply, a missing emoji. Why does something so small echo so loudly inside you? This isn't just overthinking. It's a silent epidemic of meaning making. Tonight, this is what will be explored. Let's begin. A message arrives, three simple words, and suddenly your body changes. Your shoulders tighten before your mind even forms a thought. Your stomach contracts, just slightly. Your breathing shifts, shallow, careful, as if the screen is no longer glass, but a mirror reflecting something fragile back at you. The message might say, sure, or okay, or simply, that's fine, neutral, ordinary, harmless. And yet, it doesn't feel harmless. It feels unfinished. There is something about the space around the words, the absence of warmth, the missing punctuation, the tone you cannot hear. And in that silence, your mind begins to work, carefully, urgently, searching for what might be hiding underneath. Was that passive aggressive? Did something change? Did you say too much? You scroll up. You reread your last message. Then theirs. Then yours again. You study timing. How long they took to respond. Whether they usually use emojis. Whether this period at the end feels colder than usual. It sounds irrational when described out loud, but inside your body, it feels real. Overthinking a text message is not just mental noise. It is a nervous system scanning for threat. It is the quiet hum of hyperawareness, tuned too finely to subtle shifts. When information is incomplete, when tone is invisible, the mind fills in the gaps. And it rarely fills them with comfort. Digital communication removes the safety of facial expressions. No eye contact, no softened voice, no reassuring microsmile. Only words, stripped of context. And for someone who has learned to survive by reading between lines, this emptiness is not neutral. It is loud. A simple okay becomes a question mark. A delayed reply becomes distance. A seen notification becomes a story. This is not about drama. It is about sensitivity. Some nervous systems are trained to notice the smallest emotional shifts. The subtle pause before a response. The slight change in rhythm. And when that rhythm feels off, even digitally, something inside you leans forward. Alert, because misinterpretation feels dangerous. To be misunderstood has cost you something before. To say the wrong thing has shifted closeness before. Silence has meant withdrawal before. So now, even the smallest message carries weight, not because you are fragile, but because words, for you, have never been just words. They have always been clues. There was a time when tone mattered more than words. A parent saying, "It's fine," could mean safety, or it could mean something was about to shift. In some homes, silence was not peaceful. It was charged. It carried weather inside it, storms forming without warning, doors closing softly but heavily, footsteps that felt different depending on the mood of the house. You learned to listen beyond language. You studied facial expressions the way others studied textbooks. You noticed when laughter felt forced, when affection felt earned, when approval felt temporary. Love was present, perhaps, but not always steady. And when love is unpredictable, the nervous system adapts. It becomes skilled at reading microchanges in tone, skilled at sensing distance before it is spoken, skilled at adjusting yourself quickly, softening your words, shrinking your needs. replaying conversations to make sure you did not cause the shift. This is how hyperreading begins. It is not a personality flaw. It is a survival intelligence. If silence once meant punishment, if a small mistake once led to withdrawal, if emotional closeness once felt conditional, then ambiguity does not feel neutral. It feels dangerous. A delayed response now echoes an older delay. A short reply now resembles an older coldness. The body does not separate past from present as cleanly as logic does. It reacts first. It remembers before you consciously do. So when a text message feels heavy, it is rarely about the message alone. It is about history layered quietly beneath it. You are not just reading the words on the screen. You are reading every room you once walked into carefully, every mood you had to anticipate, every moment when connection felt uncertain. The adult mind calls it overthinking, but the younger part of you calls it vigilance, because once, paying attention kept you close to love, and the nervous system never forgets what once protected it. The human brain does not like empty spaces. When information is missing, it does not wait patiently. It fills the gap. This is not weakness. It is wiring. Deep inside the mind lives a small, ancient structure designed for one purpose: survival. It scans for threat faster than logic can intervene. Before you consciously interpret a message, this system has already asked a question: is this safe? A neutral text provides very little data. No tone, no facial expression, no contextual cues, just words floating without emotional anchors. And to the threat detection system, ambiguity often leans negative because from an evolutionary perspective, it was safer to assume danger than to miss it. If a sound in the bushes might be a predator, caution keeps you alive. If a social cue might signal rejection, vigilance protects belonging. The brain evolved to overestimate threat rather than underestimate it. And digital communication, stripped of nuance, creates perfect conditions for misinterpretation. Research in cognitive psychology describes something called negativity, bias, the tendency to give more weight to potential harm than to neutral or positive explanations. So when a message feels unclear, the mind does not instinctively choose the most generous meaning. It often chooses the most protective. 1. They're upset. You said something wrong. They're losing interest. These interpretations arrive quickly, automatically. Another layer deepens the spiral. Intolerance of uncertainty. Some nervous systems experience not knowing as physically uncomfortable. The unknown feels like standing on unstable ground. So the brain attempts to stabilize itself by creating a story, any story, because certainty, even negative certainty, feels calmer than ambiguity. The mind would rather believe something is wrong than sit in the space of not knowing. And so, it analyzes, replays, decodes punctuation like evidence, not because you enjoy overthinking, but because your brain is trying to close the gap between uncertainty and safety. A delayed reply becomes a threat to connection. A short message becomes potential withdrawal. Logic may whisper, it's probably nothing. But the nervous system responds first. It is not drama. It is biology meeting memory inside the quiet glow of a screen. After the message is sent, a different process begins, not on the screen, but inside you. It is subtle at first. A flicker of doubt, then a question, then another, and suddenly, the mind transforms into a courtroom. You are the defendant. And you are also the judge. Every word you typed is examined, every emoji questioned, every pause between messages replayed as if it holds hidden evidence. Was that too much? Should you have said less? Did that sound needy? The imagination fills in the other person's expression. A raised eyebrow, a sigh, a shift in tone that may not exist at all, and the verdict begins to form. Quietly, harshly. Maybe you were too intense, too available, too honest, or perhaps not enough. Not interesting enough, not warm enough. The fear beneath it all is rarely about grammar. It is about worth. Being too much feels like standing on the edge of rejection. Being not enough feels like dissolving into invisibility. So the mind searches for mistakes before someone else can point them out. It criticizes you preemptively. It rewrites the exchange in imaginary versions where you are calmer, cooler, more effortless. Because if the problem is you, then at least there is control. But control is an illusion in relationships. No amount of internal editing can guarantee how someone else will feel. And yet, the courtroom continues, fueled by the hope that self-correction will prevent abandonment. This internal dialogue can sound logical, rational, even responsible, but beneath it lives a quieter fear. What if being yourself is what pushes people away? So you analyze tone. You shrink enthusiasm. You hesitate before sending the next message, not because you want to manipulate perception, but because you want to remain chosen. And in that quiet courtroom, the harshest voice is often your own. There is a particular kind of silence that only exists after you press send. The message leaves your hands, and suddenly, you are exposed. The waiting begins quietly. At first, you tell yourself it doesn't matter. You place the phone down. You try to return to whatever you were doing. But part of you remains tethered, a thin, invisible thread stretching between your chest and that small glowing screen. You check. Not urgently, just casually, still no reply. Minutes begin to feel longer than they are. Your mind starts calculating possibilities. They could be busy. They could be driving. They could be asleep. But another voice whispers alternative endings. Maybe they're pulling away. Maybe they regret the conversation. Maybe you said something that shifted the energy. This is where imagination becomes loudest. Not because there is evidence, but because there is space. And in that space, old fears rise like sediment stirred at the bottom of a river. Waiting is not just waiting. It is vulnerability without reassurance. The digital world intensifies this exposure. You can see when someone is online. You can see when they've read the message. You can see that they are active, just not with you. And that small detail can feel like proof of distance. Even when none exists, the body reacts. A slight heat in the chest, a tightening in the jaw, a restless urge to check again. Because silence, for some, has never been neutral. Silence once meant withdrawal. Silence once meant tension. Silence once meant being left alone with unanswered questions. So now, even digital quiet can awaken something ancient, the fear that connection is slipping away. The mind begins to prepare for abandonment before it has happened. It rehearses loss as protection, and all of this unfolds in the span of a few unread minutes. It looks small from the outside, but inside, it feels like standing in an open field, unshielded, waiting for weather you cannot predict. At some point, something shifts, not in the messages, not in the other person, but in the way you look at yourself. You notice the pattern, the tightening chest, the scrolling back through conversations, the stories forming before facts arrive. And instead of immediately correcting it, suppressing it, or shaming it, you pause, you see it. The overthinking is no longer an enemy. It becomes a signal. What if this reaction is not proof that you are insecure? What if it is proof that you once had to pay attention very carefully? The moment of awareness is subtle. It does not arrive with fireworks. It arrives quietly, like realizing you have been holding your breath and gently letting it go. You begin to separate the present text from the past echo. This is a short reply, and this is an old fear. They are not the same. Self-criticism used to feel necessary. If you blamed yourself quickly enough, maybe rejection would hurt less. If you identified your flaws first, maybe you could fix them before someone else noticed. But awareness softens that reflex. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with you?" a quieter question appears. "What is this protecting?" And suddenly, the spiral slows. You see the vigilance as loyalty, the hyper-reading as intelligence, the waiting as longing for connection, not proof of weakness. This is not about eliminating overthinking overnight. It is about recognizing that it once served a purpose. It once kept you safe. When you stop fighting the reaction, it loses some of its intensity. Curiosity replaces condemnation. You are not dramatic. You are not broken. You are a nervous system that learned to anticipate. Shifts in love, now living in a world of blue ticks and typing indicators. And awareness does not erase the pattern, but it changes the way you hold it. There is a space between a message sent and a message received. For a long time, that space felt unbearable. Now, it begins to feel different, not empty, but spacious. Integration does not mean you stop noticing the tension. It means you recognize it without merging with it. The tightness in your chest becomes a sensation, not a prophecy. The urge to check your phone becomes a wave, not a command. You start to see the difference between imagination and information. Information is simple. They haven't replied yet. Imagination is elaborate. They're losing interest. You said too much. This is the beginning of the end. When these two are no longer fused together, something inside you steadies. The nervous system, once braced for impact, begins to settle into the present moment. Not because the uncertainty disappeared, but because you are no longer fighting yourself inside it. You notice that waiting does not automatically equal rejection. Silence does not automatically equal abandonment. A short reply does not automatically equal disinterest. These are interpretations, not facts. And as this awareness deepens, you experience a quiet separation. The younger part of you may still lean forward, alert, but another part, calmer, older, gently observes. Both parts exist. One remembers instability. The other recognizes reality. Integration is allowing them to coexist without one overpowering the other. You still care. You still value connection. You still feel the pull of closeness. But the panic softens into presence. There is room now to breathe between messages. Room for the possibility that nothing is wrong. Room for the idea that someone else's delay may have nothing to do with your worth. And in that room, something quietly strengthens. Not indifference, stability. A text message is small, a few words, a blinking cursor, a soft vibration against your palm, and yet, it carries so much because it was never just about the words. It was about what the words represent: attention, closeness, reassurance. A message is a tiny window into attachment, into the ancient human need to feel chosen, remembered, responded to. When the reply is warm, something inside you settles. When it is delayed, something inside you wonders. This is not shallow. It is human. Long before phones existed, belonging determined survival. Being included meant safety. Being ignored meant risk. The nervous system still carries that imprint, even in a world of Wi-Fi and read receipts. So when you overthink a message, you are not obsessing over pixels. You are responding to connection. You are trying to protect something tender, and perhaps the quiet truth is this. The intensity you feel around texts is proportional to how deeply you care, not just about the person, but about staying close, about not losing something meaningful. The screen becomes a mirror. It reflects your longing to be understood without misinterpretation, to express yourself without being too much, to exist in someone's world without shrinking or performing. That longing is not a flaw. It is the echo of attachment seeking steadiness. And if this reflection felt familiar, if something quiet inside you softened while listening, you are not alone in this. There are countless people who reread messages, who analyze punctuation, who feel a small ache during silence. It does not mean you are broken. It means your nervous system has learned to value connection deeply. If you'd like to stay connected to a space where the hidden corners of the human heart are explored gently, where patterns are understood, not judged, you're welcome here. And if you feel comfortable, you can share your experience below. Not because you have to, but because sometimes your words might help someone else realize they are not the only one waiting, wondering, caring this much. Take care of yourself. You deserve gentleness.